Thank you very much, ladies. Title of that song, My Heart is Filled with Thankfulness. I hope that is a description of your heart and mind tonight. And I hope that we can hold that in our heart. I promise you I'm not going to speak long, but I want you to turn to the 136th Psalm. The 136th Psalm is a lot different than a lot of Psalms. In fact, it really is a follow-up of the 135th Psalm, which keeps saying the same thing over and over again. Praise ye the Lord, for example. But this Psalm, 136, 26 verses, 26 times, it repeats, for his mercy endureth forever. And you know, if you're familiar with this psalm, you tend to want to skim through it because you think, well, you know, it probably doesn't have anything new to say to me because it keeps repeating that phrase, for his mercy endureth forever. Why that? Well, I believe that the Psalms were songs that were sung, and they were sung at the temple. And it's likely, probable, that the Jewish priests and Levites would sing the first line of every one of these verses, and then the whole congregation would join in on the refrain, his mercy endureth forever. It was a wonderful time of worship there at the temple, and I want to look at that for a moment. The 136th Psalm. His mercy endureth forever. His mercy is really God's eternal, God's unchanging, committed love for his people. That's what the word mercy is. God's never-changing, eternally committed love for his people. In fact, the 136th Psalm is called the Great Hallel. The Hallel Psalms are 113 to 118. They're sung at Passover. They were sung by the pilgrims, not our pilgrim fathers, but they were sung by the Jewish people when they were making the journey, the Aliyah, up to Jerusalem for the 3 annual festivals. But the Great Hallel here, the 136th, notice how it begins and how it ends. Verse 1, O give thanks unto the Lord. Notice how it ends. O give thanks unto the Lord. So it begins by calling for giving thanks to God, and sandwiched in between verse 1 and verse 26, sandwiched in between the call to give thanks to God is the reason why. And I want to briefly look at that. The crux of the whole psalm is that the eternally constant, committed, unchanging love that God repeats 26 times in this psalm. If you look at it closely, in our English Bible, words that are in italics are not in the original Hebrew language. So if you look at it closely, that phrase, for his mercy endureth forever, it literally is this, forever his mercy. That's all it says. Forever his mercy. Forever his committed, unchanging love. Look at verse 1 with me. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good. But notice the word he is in italics, which means, again, it's not in the original language. It is good. What does it mean? Does it mean that God is good? That's how the translators interpreted it, and I think that's proper. But it also could simply mean it's good to give thanks. God's good, yes, but it's also good for us to give thanks to God because he is good, right? What are we to give thanks for? You can just boil the whole psalm down into 2 things. Number 1, you're to give thanks to God for who he is. And you have his identity here. If you look in the verse 2, or actually verse 1, give thanks unto who? What's different about that word Lord? It's all capital letters, isn't it? And whenever it's all capital letters in our English Bible, that means give thanks to Yahweh. Give thanks to Jehovah. Give thanks to this God who is the eternally existent one. He always was, he is, he always will be. He doesn't need anything or anyone else to sustain him. He's self-sustaining, and this is the name that God uses when he establishes a covenant with the people of Israel. So, who are we to thank? Who are we to give thanks to? First of all, to this one who is called the Lord, Yahweh, the eternal covenant-keeping God. And then look at the next verse. Give thanks unto the God of gods, the Elohim of Elohim. And that is an emphasis upon him being the creator. That's the first words that we find in the Bible. In the beginning, Elohim created that. So this is connecting him with the creator, the power of creation. And then the next verse, 3, give thanks unto the Lord of lords, the Adon of Adonai, the Lord of lords. And it's a emphasis upon him being the ruler of rulers, the sovereign over all. And then one other thing, down to verse 26, give thanks unto the God of heaven. Give thanks to the God of heaven. That is the Almighty One, the El of the heavens, the God who is almighty. In other words, we're to give thanks for who he is. And this is just a smattering of who he is. This isn't the totality of who he is, but it is who God is. We're to give thanks and his identity here. And then the second thing that this psalm can be summed up, we're to give thanks not only for who he is, but we're to give thanks for what he does. Okay? And so it talks about his works, beginning in verse 4, really to the end of the psalm. And there's a certain connection to God's eternal, unchanging love, his what is called mercy here. There's a certain connection when we look at his works that it's amazing. And here's what I mean. In verses 4 to 9, it's talking about his work of creation. He says, to him who alone doeth great wonders, for his mercy endureth forever. I won't read that phrase. To him that by wisdom made the heavens, verse 6. To him that stretched out the earth above the waters, verse 7. To him that made great lights, verse 8. The sun to rule by day, verse 9. The moon and stars to rule by night. Emphasizing that we should give thanks to God for what he does. And here, creation. Now, don't you logically think, when you think about God creating, don't you logically connect his power with his creation? Wouldn't that seem to be more fitting? That it would say, for his power endureth forever. But that's not what the psalmist says here. It's a tremendous thing that is behind creation. It's not about God's power, but it's about God's faithful love. The reason behind the creation, this tells us, the reason that God created this world and the reason that God sustains this world is because God's personal focus is on you. God's specific focus is on mankind and his purpose for mankind, meaning his love and care for us. That's why it's not his power, but his mercy, his faithful love that's being emphasized here. And the second work that tells us what he does here in this chapter is really history and how he works through history, how he works powerfully in the circumstances of humanity, how he organizes and arranges them and uses history to accomplish his purpose for mankind. And that's the rest of the chapter, really. And again, you would logically connect God's unchanging, God's committed love to Israel's call, and that's mentioned here, and Israel's deliverance and their direction and their provision. But what's astonishing to me is God links his mercy, can you believe this, to the killing of the Egyptian firstborn. Look at that in verse 10. It says, to him that smote Egypt in their firstborn, for his mercy, his faithful love. It is eternal. It endures. It never changes. He connects God's faithful love, his committed love, to not only that, but also in verse 15, to defeating and drowning Pharaoh and the entire Egyptian army. Look at that. But overthrew Pharaoh and his host in the Red Sea, for his committed love is unchanging. And then in verses 17 to 22, I'm not going to take the time to read it, in killing famous kings that came against Israel in the wilderness, and confiscating their lands and giving their lands to Israel. He does that based upon his... Now, if that phrase would be because his justice endures forever, I would get that. But instead it says his mercy. So it makes it a little difficult to understand. In God's unchanging, in God's committed love, he eliminates people. And he does it because of his covenant that he has made, and because he is cutting out, as a surgeon cuts a cancerous tumor out of the human body to prevent a worsening of the disease and to save what's left. We don't think that way. That's how God thinks. And when God eliminates people, at times it's his faithful, committed love that he does that. He's a God of justice, but he's a God of mercy. This is mercy when he delivers his people in this way. Verse 25 just takes it broadly. Who giveth food to all flesh. You know, God gives a ton of herring to a single whale every day for breakfast. His unchanging, committed love for us will care for us forever. And then verse 26, oh, give thanks to the God of heaven, for his mercy endureth forever. So let us give thanks to God for his unchanging, committed love to us. And we'll give you the opportunity to do that in just a moment. We're going to sing one more song, and then we're going to go offline, and it's going to just be us. We're going to be family here. And we're going to give you an opportunity to say one significant thing that you are thankful to God for tonight. The one big thing that you're thankful to God for tonight. That's all I want to hear. And anyone that wants to can say it, but you're not, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have to, okay? It's not required, but it would be great if everyone would have one significant thing they thank God for.